post-independence, since Manipur got independence in 1949, until then, the borders, even now, the India-Myanmar border is not fenced. It's an open border. So there's a lot of in-out going on. A lot of people have their relatives on the other sides, and it's like an open border. There's just one check post in a place called More, and rest of it is relatively open. Although officially no one is supposed to go, but that's how the local dynamics work. Now, all three groups, for example, the Nagas, you must have heard about the groups NSCN-K, NSCN-IM, and multiple splinter groups of NSCN, NSCN-R, NSCR, whatever. So all these groups, they are the Naga groups, and they are demanding something called as a Greater Nagalim. So Nagalim is supposed to be a nation which includes the Naga areas of Manipur, of course, Nagaland, some parts bordering Assam as well as some parts in Myanmar. So this has to become Nagaland. They have their own flag, they have with their ideology, and it's a very old fight. Then come the Methi groups who want Manipur as a separate nation, but then they want Manipur intact. Of course, there's still some border issues with neighboring state. And then there are the Kuki people who believe they demand a greater Kuki land, which the Kukis migrated into India from Myanmar way back. They were used by the Britishers as assassins. They used to work with the British. This is way back before the idea of a nation and everything was here. It was every man for himself. So they demand a greater Kuki land, which includes, of course, the Kuki areas of Myanmar, towards Mizoram side, if you're familiar with the geography, and parts of Myanmar as well. So these are three distinct ideas. Now, what has happened is even if today everyone has a common enemy, that is the Indian Army, or rather India, I would say, because there are there are local police, there are central forces, there is the army, everyone is there. So today the common enemy is the Indian Army, Assam Rifles, the BSF who used to initially operate in the area, or even the local police. The moment if the Indian Army goes out, we'll still have a war in our hands, because then it would be total anarchy, and there would be still fights going on over the land. And the areas are very clearly defined based on which tribes stay in which areas. And that, if you plot these tribal areas on map, you can actually see that the state can easily it's as good as divided in 3 parts or 4 parts, leaving the Asian highway. Now, these are the dynamics of Manipur. So presently, there are a lot of groups who have surrendered. Most of the Naga groups in Manipur, mainly only NSCN-IM, one faction of the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, was active. That was IM. NSCN-K was a bit less active in these areas, although they were involved in a couple of major operations in these areas. And then there are the Kuki groups, all of who have surrendered, and they have their camps. How we call them as, there is something known as a SU camp. A SU camp is a surrender of operations camp. So the groups, there are 2 types of agreements. One is the SU, so surrender of operations. So they surrender their operations. They can keep weapons for only protecting their camp that they have been set up. The camp will be set up in the area that has been agreed upon with the state. And of course, the state has a larger say in it because it involves local dynamics. And then there is the NSCN-IM, which has talks going on with the central government, which they have their kind of agreement is far more, I would say, liberative, whatever, compared to the Kuki groups. And what these groups do once they surrender is they officially stay in that area. They do their extortions and they basically survive. They do whatever they want to do, but then they have that the forces can of course check them at any point, but then they have the local population on their side, or the local population is just too scared to come out and speak against them. We had come across certain documents which we were surprised. They were like, we had, there were the tax system that was set up in these areas. Some of these areas was, would give a run for the money for our national taxation system. So the taxation system would be based on the professions, based on the number of members in the family. They're taken into account how much a person in a government job would earn, how much hours he works, and what products he sells. Someone goes to the market, someone has a shop, what kind of products he sells, and everything was taken into account, and they had a very fine taxation system. Now we just came onto this by means of intelligence or by accident, if we want to put it that way. But that's how it is. They're so ingrained in the system that it's not a military problem anyway now. It cannot be solved militarily. And that is what the Northeastern insurgency is about. It is not, if like you would have seen the area, when we see our problems with China, we say it's a political problem. It cannot be solved militarily, because then nobody wants to solve it militarily. And that is the reason it keeps dragging on and on. Similarly, in the Northeast, I'm sure if we think, we can see the Northeast had been largely ignored by our mainstream media, every one of us. One basic thing that when I heard about it, that it made me realize, yes, Northeast has been neglected, is the time zone. So now the Northeast, the sunset goes is around 4 in the evening their time. So 4:30 it starts getting dark, and there's light quite early in the morning. And based on their timings, they had their own way of living, where they would eat at a certain time, they would go to work on a certain time. Now with the watches and all, their body clock has also changed a lot. So a simple thing, like people have been saying, they should have a separate time zone, which is a very basic thing, and it's easy for anyone to see and understand, but it has been ignored. So such issues, smaller issues coming up, ignorance over a larger time, and of course local vested interest trying to gain power with help of these issues has led to the insurgency getting to this stage. Today, mainly the groups that are active in the Northeast are not that, I wouldn't say they are active, but they still do a couple of operations a year. They come in, they have their camps on the Myanmar side of the border. They come in, they do some, we call them standoff attacks. They would come in. The jungles are as thick that you cannot see beyond even 10 feet if someone crawls besides you. So jungles are that thick in those areas. And you cannot expect somebody from the local population to help you out, because their lives are at stake as well. In fact, it brings out that they actually trust the Indian forces, that they won't do them harm, but they cannot trust the insurgents, because they know killing is a very small thing. The families get destroyed if they're found to be on the army side. So similar things. So mainly all these groups are rather quiet, but there are 2-3 groups, the Meitei groups, as we call them, UNLF, PLA, and Pre-Pak, KYKL, and some of these groups. There are a couple of Naga groups, most important and prominent among them is NSC and IM. And then there are Poki groups, which almost all of them have surrendered, and they're more of a nuisance there for extortions and all. So this is the general idea of Manipur. And all of this today, Manipur is divided on both sides by the Asian Highway 102. The Asian Highway is the one that connects India to Myanmar by road, and I think it goes beyond till the borders of Myanmar into Thailand and all. There have been a lot of it's always covered by media. When this highway initially opened up, it was known as it was supposed to change the dynamics of this area. Now this highway also gets us closer to the Golden Triangle, as we call it. It's the Golden Triangle is is actually is actually an area of international crime, which includes the borders of Laos, Thailand, some parts of Myanmar, as well as some parts of China. Now, this particular Golden Triangle, despite being 4 countries, but then this particular area is an international hub of drugs trade, weapons trading, and whatnot. And Myanmar, because of the Myanmarese Janta being in power there, even when the political parties were in power, but the Janta had ruled the lands, ruled the roads rather. So it's all tied up. Everyone has their vested interests, and all these illegal drugs and everything, they come through India through this particular Asian highway. This is used a lot. Some of them go through the jungle, but then it becomes difficult to move in through the jungles to carry out large quantities. So this is another facet which brings in money part, which has again kept this area very volatile, and people trying to vying for control of these areas, because now everybody might have started out with a cause, but today it is more about the finances, the economies, the money that comes in with it. And you use cause on and off, like we put some spices in the food after the food is prepared. So it's about money, the kind of things are being done on ground and all. It's all about money now. And proximity to Myanmar and the Golden Triangle is what is making this even more complex. You could ask any questions on this, the Northeastern, and then we could go to the counter-terrorism side. Anything you guys want?
So can you shed some light on the government's peace pact with NSCN of 2015, and what changes has that brought in the current operations?
So the pact, now, if you remember, NSCN-K was also part of this pact. During this pact, how NSCN-K in fact announced that they are breaking away from this pact was, they ambushed a water tanker, a water bowser as we call it. The people felt they were safe, and they went to a nearest water point to collect some water. They were unarmed, they were not prepared, and they fired on this particular vehicle. We lost men. They ambushed us, and they said that we no longer want peace. What has happened, as per my understanding, is it might have, of course, it was not possible. We were not able to handle it in terms of political. Yeah, and even the insurgents, they didn't want it to go on, because now what has happened is they have got they're legally there. They have their own camps. They have their own weapons, which are officially there. It is all sanctioned by the government. They, of course, carry out their extortion and everything. They have their network, but they can now, the moment some local police, local forces go on, and if they apprehend a couple of these insurgents, what happens is the insurgents, I have seen the insurgents actually threatening us, saying that we talk to Delhi, we don't talk to you. You're not at our level. We speak in Delhi, and then because we are in talks, you cannot do this to us. You cannot, and we couldn't. Of course, we at that time one has one's ego online, and so one says whatever one says. But we know we cannot really do them any harm because they are in talks with the central government. So these people have effectively been using these talks to carry out their illegal activities, to carry out their extortions, strengthen themselves. Today in the Hebron camp, which is the headquarters of NSCN-IM, I don't have the exact numbers, but they have the complete, it's as good as a battalion strength, a lot of men coming in, weapons. They have they celebrate their own Independence Day, the Nagaland Day and all. So it's like a country within a country, and it is like they're running a parallel government. And with the talks, of course, if the talks would have been concluded but like you see, the talks have been going on for past 7-8 years now. So I really don't see, every time, every some months, there is a news that yes, now the solution is very near, and all of us are excited or apprehensive. What is going to happen? What is going to come out? Because none of us are aware. And then it just turns out to be something the people were just saying, and there's nothing actually happening on ground. So this has given them a air of legality. They're still carrying out their of course, they don't carry out operations against the forces, but they carry out they're legally there. They carry out their extortions. They're strengthening themselves, and they're using this opportunity to live freely. And now their cadres, they can stay with their families. So for them, it's a win-win. So they get their money, they do their extortions, they stay with their families are around, families are happy that he's doing something legal. When I was there in 2018, we had heard something known as, you guys must have heard about the TA battalions, the Territorial Army Battalions. So what happens is that we have local Territorial Army Battalions. So we have Naga Territorial Army Battalions. We have in JNK, we have JACLI, Jammu Kashmir Light Infantry Territorial Army Battalions. So these are the people, boys who are locals, who have been in these areas. Many of them are surrendered insurgents or even terrorists as well. So they bring a certain different kind of a perspective. They are battle-hardened, operationally excellent people. So we got a news saying that all the NSCM IM cadres, those who are there, they would be formed into a TA battalion. So basically, they'll be central government forces, and they will be stationed in the Naga areas. And they use this news. It was as if they had spread this news. Nothing had come from any government sources. But they use this news to get people from other groups to join them, other Naga groups, splinter Naga groups, to join them, because the other Naga groups felt, why should I roam around in wilderness? I'd rather go and join NSC and IM and increase their numbers, where I will get a legitimate uniform and I'll draw a salary from the Indian government. What else do I want in life? I am an army soldier then. So similar things keep going on in ground, and that's what's happening.
Yes, sir. Aditya, you had a question.
Yes, sir, has already answered.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, Maya, unmute yourself.
Thank you for this talk, sir. I just wanted to know a quick question. When it comes to, say, these sorts of insurgent groups and their splinter groups, for example, NSCM and the NSCM KK or NSCNR, what are the ideological differences between these groups that cause them to become splintered, sir? And follow up, can the government use these ideological differences to our advantage when formulating a strategy against them?
So it's an interesting question, Amay. So splinters, they're like political parties. So NSCNK would have a lot of, like I said, they represent the Nagas, but there are many different tribes within the Nagas. So NSCNK would have a majority of certain Naga tribes, the Konyaks, or certain areas of Nagaland wherein most of the NSCNK cadres come from. So they would have more support from those tribes. While NSCN-IM would come from, the majority of their cadres would come from certain parts. Similarly, NSCN-R. So one is there might be some ideological differences, that the way they should go, they should fight the government, maybe the demands that they've been placing with the government. If NSCN-IM is going soft on certain demands, certain leaders would want that we should not, this is not something that we should accept from the army. For example, if the government asks them to lay them down their arms and IM says we are fine with it, but you need to enlist our soldiers in the TA battalion. Now the NSCNR would say, no, we'll not lay down our arms. So similar smaller differences, I am not privy to those, but this is what is my understanding. And of course, another reason is with the intertribal differences, leaders coming from certain tribes, leaders not coming from certain tribes. And when those tribes go strong, now for example, NSCNK has a lot of Konyak population now, representation. Now they are in a certain part of Nagaland, which is very close to Myanmar border, and they have a lot of Konyaks on the other side as well. That is the Myanmar side. Now, what happens is when all of the Konyaks come together, they have a sizable strength, and then the other tribes might feel their representation is lower, and this could be another reason that these factions could be coming out. It could also be an internal ploy to just keep pushing the government for demands, because the government has to keep engaged. The moment government doesn't agree something with NSCNIM, NSCNIM would just ask one of his leaders to just float another faction, which would then say, we don't want talks with government of India. Eventually, government of India would actually want to get them on board as well, and they would try to agree with their demands as well. So it's more of a political game, and also the intertribal differences could come into play. The government, no, I believe it's very difficult to take advantage of these, because they come first. For them, all the Nagas come first, and the government of India would always be their number one enemy. So anything to do with government of India, it is highly likely that they're actually a single group within, and they're just fooling you and taking you for a ride and the moment you play these cards, it could actually backfire in a major way. So I believe that is the reason. And I don't think we have for example, any Naga who is so well connected, who has so much power over these areas. Being on the government side would be very difficult for him, because traditionally they have a family oriented and a community oriented society. So it becomes very difficult to do these kind of things.
So we have one more question. Sakshi?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
So my question to you is, how is China playing role in insurgent movements in the Northeast via the junta within Indian territory? Like, how is it benefiting them?
So thank you, Sakshi, for the question. So from what the times I was there, China has a certain area. China, of course, has some border with Myanmar. And as you know, the Myanmar has its own insurgent problems, which are huge. So there are certain rebel groups in Myanmar, they have their own artillery. They're small, they're as good as LTT on a smaller scale. The ARSA, as you would have seen, they were active during the Rohingya incidents as well. There are Kachin Independent Army, and there are multiple such huge groups in Myanmar. Now, many of these groups get their funding and support from China. China uses these groups. That was our assessment. So China uses these groups to put pressure on Myanmar, and Myanmar doesn't want their internal insurgency. As long as China controls them, Myanmar certainly gives them some leeway. We have been trying to engage with Myanmar a lot. But then ultimately, we don't go in and create problems in their countries. If they think of their country first, they would want peace within, and they don't have the capability to fight China. So if China can ignite such insurgencies, such problems within Myanmar of course has to have a slightly softer stance towards China. Now, there are certain areas of Myanmar and China where we had heard of meetings. We had heard about the insurgent groups, leaders going in, getting money, weapons, training from Chinese side. Of course, we could not verify these on ground, but that is what our report said. So that's how China is putting pressure on Myanmar through Myanmar through the Myanmarese insurgent groups and the Indian groups who already have camps in Myanmar closer to the Chinese border, them getting trained, getting arms and weapons from Chinese side on a smaller scale maybe, or a larger scale. But that's a card they can play any day if war breaks out in the Northeast. So that is something we have to be alert to as well. So that's how I believe they can and they have been using these insurgent groups. And one more thing. So now it's China. When pre-71, the NSCN-K, the UNLF, these Manipuri groups, they used to go to Bangladesh for training. So we had the radio intercepts and all. So we would see these groups going on annual training camps and all to Bangladesh. They would go through Myanmar, and they would go to Bangladesh. They would be trained by ISI, and then they would come back with weapons and everything. So for anyone to use these groups to their advantage is quite easy, because now for them it's they have only one enemy, that is India. They, or as they call us the Indian Occupation Forces, IOF. So every time in the newspaper, it's the freedom fighters attack the IOF post. That is how the news comes in. So it's very easy for these countries who want to harm India to get these groups on their side. But another thing that goes against this is all the insurgent groups, all the Manipuri groups, or who I have seen on ground. They are a very family-oriented. They are a family-oriented society. So they still have their relatives, their parents, their wives, who stay on our side of the inside Manipuri towns and villages. They come and visit them. They can't just. They are not fidains. They are not there to give away their lives. They would never engage you in a pitched battle. They would. So when that is the fundamental difference between the terrorism in the north and the insurgencies in the northeast. So someone in the terrorist coming in JNK, he comes there to die. He would say that I'm as it is going to die. I will take many as me as possible. But that won't happen in the northeast. They're not there. They believe in their cause, as they say, but they're not there to die. They would not carry out such fidine attacks. They would rather surrender and come because they know eventually they'll move out or whatever. But that's one fundamental difference, and that again, I believe, hence the other countries cannot use them in the manner they have been using the terrorists in the north. They're not radicals, is what I would say.
Sir, in 2012, Myanmar and NSCNK signed the NAC, but that didn't work out at the longer run, and the Myanmar army took control of NSCNK headquarters in 2019. So can we expect the fallback on the treaties also in the future?
So the 19 development of Myanmar army taking over the K camp was a very interesting. There is the area that they refer to is again the right opposite Nagaland rather than opposite Manipur. And we ourselves are very surprised because we believe the Indian government keeps doing various engagements, various Indian intelligence agencies keep operating in these areas, which most of us are, even we were not aware. We would come to hear of it later on. So there must have been some kind of engagement because of which the Myanmarese army did this kind of an action. Now, the areas which the Naga groups, Myanmaris and Indian, they control in these areas, there are a lot of jade mines in these areas. If you have heard about, so there is a huge controversy about the jade mines and the mining that goes on in Myanmar. So one of the reasons that they actually took the control of the camp could have been, as per our assessment, was due to the Naga groups trying to ask more part of the mine, or it could have been an economic issue rather than something related to the politics or something else. Their elections also. Now, Myanmar has a lot of Nagas. So when Myanmarese elections come in, they have to have these people on their side. And so they keep them, they want to keep them on their side. So that's how it goes. So we're not sure that they actually, one is if they actually took control of the camp, or that is what they told us. And second is that if they actually did, what was the reason? And taking control of the camp might have been a temporary thing. And the groups might have started operating as they were short while after this so-called takeover of the camp.
Sure, sir. Thank you, sir. Amaya has a question. Amaya?
Sorry for interrupting you on this one, sir, but I had a question regarding, basically you said that insurgent groups usually end up getting funding or training from outside influences.
Mm-hmm.
So my question there becomes, sir, how do you then differentiate between an insurgent group and a terrorist group? And operationally, in your experience, what is the difference mainly, sir?
So it's not that they receive complete funding. So funding, most of their funding comes from extortion. Now the insurgent groups who have their camps in Myanmar have to pay the Myanmarese army through their nose to let them stay in that area. So effectively, they are bribing the Myanmarese army, the military junta, and they are taking extortions. They have their we call it Jhoom Kheti, the opium and all plantations in various parts of Manipur, and as well as extortion. So that is their major source of income. Of course, there might be some funding from outside, but that's what we say. Now, the fundamental difference, it still is that they are our people. Our people is, all I'm saying is they have their families, they have their wives, kids staying in these areas, and we know them. And we would, tomorrow, if a flood breaks out, we would still go and save their family, because for us, they are a family. They are not the problem there, they are the family. So they know their families, when their roots are here, so, and they don't intend to go out and die. They still want to visit their family. Their families go to certain towns in Myanmar, go visit them. We had their Facebook profiles where we would see they would spend annual holidays somewhere, they would go boating and all. So the fundamental mentality is hugely different in these areas. Today, an insurgent, if he just picks up his hand and he says, oh no, I don't want to do this any longer, I'm going back, he won't have problem coming back and settling down. But I cannot say that about JNK, because the situation on ground is very different. One is the locals won't let him, the local insurgents won't let him survive, local terrorists there won't let him survive, but that is not the case here. So that is the fundamental difference. It's the radicalism that is in their minds. Many, just one more thing to this, many young boys, which we saw in Manipur going on the other side, there is a gun culture, the photographs, with putting their photographs on gun with Facebook, impressing females, trying to do this, trying to show that I'm firing bullets. So that gun culture, which is prevalent in many countries in Southeast Asia, which we see in movies. So that is also one of the reasons. It sounds surprising that why would someone just give away everything and go and handle guns? Because it's a tough life. It's not an easy life of an insurgent, from training to survival and all. But that is another thing that attracts them as well. And then there are not many jobs in Manipur. The economy is not that developed. The whatever little tourism is small parts of it. Majority is farming, and very small part is businesses. So there are no jobs as such that the youth would go to instead of going on. So the youth would actually say, what do I have anything better to do? I'd rather go there, at least I have meals, and they will keep giving me money, which I can send across to my family. So it's many times it's like a job. And how many operations do you carry out? I carry out an operation maybe once a year, maybe once in 2 years. So it's a safe life that way. It might be a tough life, but it's a safe life, and my family gets taken care of. So that could also be one of the thought processes.
Yes, sir. Aditya.
Right, sir. So I want to just ask a small question that is it really safe to have these elements in our kind of land? Because if they're getting the support that they need from the outside, is it not possible that they take up the terrorist actions as well if the time comes and if the sources are given to them?
So see, having them or not having them is not something we can control, Aditya, because that is their home. Now they come back to meet their families, is like what I'm saying. They have connections, they have their relatives and everything. So they only very unequivocally they say, and they only target the forces. They would not harm a civilian. There have been instances in the past wherein somebody has informed on them and his family has been killed and all. But today, a tourist, if you as a tourist go to any parts of Manipur, any parts of Northeast, Nagaland, you would be treated like a king. You would be taken care of, and you can be rest assured that they would not think twice about before giving away their lives to save yours, because you are their guest. So that way it becomes very difficult. It's not that black and white to say he needs to go out. Where do you send him? Because he's as such staying in a different country. He's coming back. He's doing whatever he wants to do. He's going back. So we are trying to apprehend them. We are trying to try the sources of funding. The government on their side is trying to try their sources of funding, because ultimately when the funds becomes less economically, the moment it becomes unviable, that is when these things are likely to reduce and end. And that is why we are trying to help the Myanmarese government economically, financially, so that they don't end up supporting these groups as well. So I actually, maybe I didn't get your question, but it becomes very difficult to just say, ki, throw him out. Where do we throw him out? And what does throw out exactly mean?
No, sir. I'm saying not like throwing them out, but keeping them in check, or making sure that they don't do the criminal stuff that you said, no? Bribing or holding people.
So that is something that is already always the aim. That is something that everyone always tries to do. But when you go on ground today, if I go to a village, for example, if we, from what you said, we talk about extortion. Now, somebody who is, the groups are on the other side, they would appoint someone, an unemployed youth here whom they trust. They would tell him that you will collect taxes on our behalf. Now, today, if you go to the villagers and you ask them, tell me who is taking tax from you, they will say, are you an idiot? They will not even talk to me about that. They will not even accept that they're doing anything as such. So they are more scared, and because they ultimately believe that these insurgent groups might cause them harm. And the army today, you see, the units are in rotation. So we go to a place, we stay for 2.5 years, 3 years, we move out, somebody else comes in. So I've had this said on my face that aapka kya hai, 2 saal mein chale jaoge, hame to yahi rehna hai. So why, for your 2 years, for your battles, your honors, your awards, why do you want me to put my life on the line? When somebody says that, you don't have an answer. I cannot say to him, I'll protect you, jaise movies mein, because that cannot happen. I cannot take him and keep him inside or wherever. He wouldn't want to do that because uska ghar hai wahan pe. So that is why it becomes complicated to deal with these situations.
Right, sir. Understood. Thanks.
Thank you.
So we have one more question. Sakshi.
Sir, what is the NSCI and succession after Moiba? And can the insurgencies change as a result of modernization in views? And what is the center doing to influence this modernization?
So, Sakshi, I wouldn't have idea about the succession, but I'm sure they have a lot of lieutenants, captains, majors. They have their own ranking system. So a lot of them who are respected within the community and have been with him since the beginning. So I'm sure they're there, but that is also likely to cause more factions. But I'm actually not aware who, by names, of course not, and how that would happen. Now, what the center is doing is, again, from whatever I've read and seen on ground, the talks are in progress. I don't know what is taking long. I don't know when they would come out. We have a CFMO, Ceasefire Monitoring Office in the Northeast. It is headed by a retired Lieutenant General who is the point of contact between the insurgents in the Northeast and the government. And so he's the one who has served in these areas for a long, long time. I'm forgetting the present CFMO's name. He was the DG Assam Rifles before this. He's General Shokin Chauhan, as far as I know. So General
Shokin Chauhan.
Sir. So Gen Shokin Chauhan is someone who has served in these areas for a lot of time, and after that, now he was part of the Ceasefire Monitoring Office. But what exactly goes on, actually only they would know, and it's in the insurgent group's interest to keep these talks continuing, because they know the moment they accept any side. Today, the Indian government might have only a couple of conditions. One is you cannot have your own flag, and second is you cannot have your own country. We will give you that certain autonomy within your state. Can they go on record and accept it? The people will immediately start questioning them. So you have been taking us for a ride for all these years, saying we'll get a separate country. So they know they cannot actually get these things from the central government. So it is in their interest to keep these talks continuing as long as, and just give small freebies, small things in between, and just take the people for a ride. I believe it's absolutely impossible for the Indian government to give them a separate country. And now they want their own flags. The demands are a lot, but I really don't know. And the government would agree to some of them, which would not break the country, of course, and keep our sovereignty in check as well. But then that's what they will just keep extending. They'll just keep playing around. It's in the interest of the insurgent groups, the people who basically don't want the insurgencies and the local problems to end. And you see this in the north as well. It's become a political issue wherein the local leaders from it's not about parties. Parties are just a means to satisfy one's personal ambitions, political parties. So it's about the local leaders, local people who actually know the day this insurgency ends, where do I get my bread? I'm not working, I'm not doing anything. Today, the additional funds, everything is coming in under this guy's pretext. Tomorrow, when all of this stops, what do? I become a nobody. Suddenly, I become a nobody. So these identity issues for the local politicians or local people are also there.
Sir, can the center influence the young blood for reforms?
Of course, they're trying, but like I said, they're a very close-knit community. Now, you take case from parts of Manipur or Nagaland. Today I'm in Bangalore, so we see a lot of these young boys coming here, working here. Most of them wouldn't want to go back because there are no jobs there. They might be there, and they're still a family-oriented society. They would go there for Christmas. They would go there for annual Rath Yatra. They would go there for similar festivals. But they would still be so tied to their family who stays back, and they have been brought up in this, that the army is their enemy. Somebody now, for example, somebody from, you see, there's a huge representation in the Indian Army from the Northeast. So somebody who gets into the army sees the things from a different perspective. So many of them go back and serve in their towns. They have their own problems when they serve in these areas, but they go on and serve in these towns. So that changes their mindset. Somebody who goes to Sainik School Imphal, somebody who gets trained with the cadets. So that is the way the government or somebody is changing the thought process. But somebody who stays there since childhood, who is working, who's not got these opportunities, and who wants basically somebody to blame, which happens in all of the other states as well. You see, the people creating problems are the people who have not gotten those opportunities, or they're comfortable where they're staying. They want themselves to be in power. They want themselves to be relevant. So these are the people whose mindsets is very difficult. But somebody who goes out, somebody who does well, generally doesn't come back with. And of course, like I brought out in the beginning, there are certain there have been plenty of times when these areas have been, the Northeast has been ignored for various. Time zone was one such example I gave. So whenever these things come up, there would be some racist incidents, for example, in Bangalore. And then suddenly one feels, what is happening? Well, this country is not mine. And then it becomes easy for someone to fuel such insecurities as well. So the government is doing some things like the Sainik schools, the NCCs, the sports representation in sports and all. But because the communities are so tight knit, it becomes very difficult to change things from the root. I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So we don't have any questions on Northeast now, so we can move. Okay, Amaya is having one.
I might as well take the last question then, sir.
Sure.
This might be a very, how should I say, speculative question, and maybe even a little bit stupid from my part. But in your experience, how do you see these insurgencies ending? From, say, an operational perspective, or from a perspective of national integration, social integration, any indication you can give us on to when and how these insurgencies will end?
No, I'm absolutely incapable of that answer. The nation has been trying to find that answer for so many years now. But operationally, no, it's not a possibility, because the problem is very, very dynamic, and it involves it does not involve one person, it involves his families. The moment the societies become involved, the families become involved, and becomes a civil unrest. So no, not operationally, politically, maybe the moment Myanmar starts engaging with us, but then it would become difficult for them to stay on the other side the moment they come inside, and then if it becomes economically unviable for them. So economics is the only way, I believe, ultimately, that these things could stop, because I don't believe the cause is there anymore. It is more about the money, and that is what is driving these. The cause is just being used to lead people, to get people on their sides. But so economics is what ultimately put an end to it, but seems highly unlikely.
Right, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That was the last question. Yeah. So we have joined the full sir also.
Sir, I had two questions. May I?
Okay.
Please.
Sure.
Sir, I had two questions for you. The first one is regarding the intelligence gathering capacity. Like, as far as SAT-INT and TAKE-INT is concerned, what is our current capacity as far as these insurgent groups are concerned? Also the human part. And the second question is regarding the SASA's report on tribal development. Do you find a solution on this insurgency group around the SASA's post-independence colonization that she had mentioned in her report?
So, Kaustubh, I'll take your first question first. So about the intelligence gathering capacity. So we are, when I went into the Northeast, when I started operating, I started looking at what intelligence we gathered. We had parts as human int, and we had parts of electronic int. That is what we had. Now the human int that we got on ground was absolutely useless. It was more, so we would get at least 20-25 inputs a day, out of which only 1 or 2, if they pan out, we were really lucky. And the inputs were never about something that the insurgent groups would do. The inputs were always about small kinds of smugglings, weapons going in from a particular place. And the moment we reached there, we would realize the input was a day late. So it's a way. So it's a professional thing for quite a lot of people there. We had an interesting case of 3 brothers who operated in our areas. Now, the 3 brothers we had 3 sectors, like we have brigades in other parts. So Assam Rifles, we have sectors. So we had these 3 brothers. Later on, we came to know they operated in all 3 sectors, and they would go in on all 3 sectors with same news. Their news would be linked, and nobody tells who their source is. So it was highly unlikely that I would discuss this with the fellow intelligence officer from the neighboring brigade, that this is something that I have. So they would sit down, they would decide to, aaj kya khilaya jaye, what should we do? And what happens is you cannot just let go of any end, because you don't know if it is true or not. Even like they say, the clock which is not working is right twice a day. So you still have to, every small end, whatever input this guy gets to you have to go in and you have to investigate. You have to try to corroborate it from alternate sources. And when you cannot corroborate, you still don't want to let it go. You just, if you get, it's a confirmed int as A1, we call our confirmed int as A1, which is confirmed from multiple sources. The source is A1, and it has panned out in the past. So the human int part is slightly weak. Again, the reason is because, like I said, it's a very close-knit society, and somebody snitches in these areas would not be taken kindly. But people understand that छोटा मोटा यहाँ से लकड़ी ले जा रहा है, वहां से कोई smuggled animal ले जा रहा है, ऐसी चीजें बताने से it is still fine. But he would not tell anything that can come back close to his home. Who would give such kind of intelligence is someone who has been hurt, someone who has a personal agenda besides money. That is someone who can actually give you the genuine human int, and which was very less in these areas. About the electronic end, what happened was the insurgents used radio sets, but generally the intercepts we caught were from the other side of the border. So what would happen was a certain PLA group camp talking to the other camp. They would talk about their rations, they would talk about movement of money, they might even talk about movement of weapons. But we cannot go on the other side and do anything. The best we could do is we could call the Myanmarese army on the hotline and we would tell that we have certain input, and then we know what would happen. So there was no point telling the Myanmar army also. So this was the general setup of the intelligence in the Northeast. Now, this is what was our intelligence. Now, we had a lot of other agencies operating there. We had the State Bureau, we had the RAW, and so on. But our problem again became coordination. While I was there, we started an initiative wherein once in a month, we would get all these intelligence agencies together, not just intelligence agencies. We would get the narcotics bureau officer, we would get the forest officer, we would get the revenue director official who had later on gotten so interested in this area because the total seizure that we had in this area was over 300 crores in 1 year. And there was a lot of gold coming in from the Myanmar side. Now this gold is something that people would give inputs on. There was a lot of illegal wildlife traded, which we would get inputs on. But we would never get, rarely would we get an input on any arms being smuggled, anything related to the insurgent cause. So that is how it was. And agencies, so many agencies, but lack of coordination. It's about credit. Like you see, it's everywhere. It's not just there, it's everywhere. Who takes the credit? Who gets the credit for the news? So if certain agency gets some input, they would tell me, no, this is not something we're supposed to share with you. We have an input, but we cannot share it with you. We need to share it with our superiors, who would then share it with your superiors, and then it might come back to you. So by the time that happened, it was already too late and there was no point doing anything. So this is what the local lack of coordination. It's not a cohesive operation in terms of intelligence gathering. Everybody is it for himself. I would try to keep my areas, my men safe from harm. So I would work towards that. The narcotics bureau guy would do same for his people. He would not get into danger. He would say, let things pass. It's not worth it. And later on, when this coordination, like I said, started improving, the only thing happened was when we caught a shipment, we caught a consignment, we would get calls to show it as a joint operation. So that was our level of coordination. So you see, this is what is the actual situation of intelligence gathering on ground. We also started, eventually there were phone calls which required special permissions to, there were special agencies who would do this. And then it required a lot of paperwork. For example, Manipur and parts of Manipur being so close to Myanmar, many of us had Myanmarese SIM cards with us because these SIM cards work. These SIM cards are anonymous for someone operating in the border parts of the area and they cannot be tracked in any case. So now when someone does that, what do you do? How do you track his phone? The insurgent would always talk on his Myanmarese SIM card. So how do you know? You don't have an option. Even if you have the number, if you get the number somehow, you can't do anything. So we would get those numbers, we would send them up the chain. By the time we got our permission to get their transcripts, we of course, it's unlike something that we see in movies. It's not that we get to hear what they're saying. There is a certain agency which would hear those conversations. If they thought something was interesting, they might send, and it involved our area, then they might send it to us a couple of days or maybe a week later. This is what we heard from this particular person of interest. Of course, it would be late by then, but then this was the best possible cohesive intelligence that we could gather. So that is about your intelligence question, but I'm actually have no idea about the second question that you asked. I've not gone through the report. I've not even read it, so I wouldn't be able to answer that.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
So Karan, one last question to you.
Yes, sir.
How is the donor ministry helping in the operational, operational excellence, or the operation helping via helping for the intel, or helping for other stuff that the Assam Rifles or the Indian Army and everybody is trying to do. So can you tell me
Donor ministry.
Donor is playing?
Okay, so I rarely knew. I didn't even know that such a ministry existed, because while we are working on the ground, now I was still sitting in headquarters. So if there was something like this, we had not from the donor ministry specifically, but we had some bureaucrats or officials coming in from the capital who would want to see these areas, who would want us to take them around in these areas to speak to local people or see how the police are operating or whatever. But no, actually, nothing on ground that at least in my time, I didn't have any interactions with them. I didn't, like I said, I didn't even hear about them before. So I'm sorry, but that's not of any help to me on ground. Many times, like you very well know, these policies, initiatives are on paper and they don't reach the actual soldier who's operating on ground, who would actually make a difference. So maybe it is just that, but if it has moved on and taken this recently, I'm not aware of that.
So basically what happens is the donor ministry, so even right from the UNLF days, so your Arambam, Samarendra Singh, yeah. So basically, yeah. So from those times when Manipuri formation just happened and everything, and then after that, so until very recent times, so intel is something that is getting gathered, but then again, formation of the youth wing that has to help the government forces, or there has something to do with the donor ministry aiding into the right kind of perception building and all of these things, because again the end mandate is for the development and growth of the Northeast, right? So yeah, so that is there, and then handing this thing over, like you rightly said. So money is, so economics is one portion of operation. Second thing is today donor is handing over stuff to and even governing towards your think east, act east, right? So there are fundings coming from the Japanese government to form special economic zones in Arunachal Pradesh, and then there are some stuff coming up. So Drishti Ayog coming for the Naga areas, wherever there is so wherever there is basic development, that has to happen. So that is where the donor links with the center, the donor links with the internal workings of even with the armed forces in the area. So that is actually what my take is. But I actually wanted to know, so and then again, influencing, when I say influencing the youth wing, and very rightly and clearly covered that if I am supposed to not only reference to the gun culture, but even if I'm supposed to help my region to grow, if I'm supposed to get employed by putting myself into some kind of a martial vocation, then why not me wearing my government uniform rather than, right? So all of that. So Karan, thanks so much. This has been very informative, and you bring a real flavor of the the intel side of serving in the Northeast. So was really nice. And everybody, I would Karan mentioned. So General Shokin Chauhan is, acting very actively on the Northeastern front, and I have interviewed him. If you could go on Diplomacy Direct's YouTube channel, even on Spotify, you will see. You will hear the entire. So I have 2 interviews with General Chauhan. One is one-on-one with him, and one is with the DGSC, that is your Director General of Supply Chain and Transport, General Sandhu. So for more information, be there. Karan, thank you so much doing this on a weekend, and all the best.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and helping me overcome my initial apprehensions, and it actually felt I should do it. Yeah, so thank you so much.
You personify that Fauji spirit, so you did it. So, fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. All have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shitish.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks much.